So there's your celebrations, babies, you know, flowers, balloons, some of your holidays. Okay, then we have built-in words, phrases. You can go through, there's 17 pages of those. Borders, 11 pages of different borders you can use. Then we have our fonts, 3 pages. And then we have our Greek letters and some scripty letters. Second page, we've looked at briefly our quilt patterns, the first 2 icons here. 4 pages of quilt blocks here. All right, and then our stencils over here. Okay. All right, now we're going to go back to our home screen. In addition to the patterns that are built into your machine, you also have access to a free software program through Brother called Canvas Workspace. It's a very easy to learn software program. You go on their site and there's all kinds of projects. They have videos that explain the projects. They show you how to import them into your machine through the software using a USB stick, or if you are wireless, you can do that. I found that wireless isn't always the easiest to do depending on where I am located in my house. Usually I use the USB stick. But Canvas Workspace is a great resource, especially when you're first starting out with the videos that go through the whole process of the project. And it's very helpful just to learn different techniques. Even if you don't want to make the project, I still found it helpful. Okay. The other icon we have is the scan. All right. And we have 3 ways that we can scan. Direct cut is when we would place something on our mat and we would go ahead and direct cut from our machine. Scan to cut, we would have something we would create, cut or draw data from images, and then put the materials on the mat and set it to the machine for going through. We have 2 modes in this option. The recognition mode for black and white. We touch the tools here and we have a recognition mode for color. And this is for when you're scanning something in and you want to get the best image possible. 9 times out of 10, the black and white recognition mode is going to work. But if you have something that's not a high contrast, then you might want to try the color scan, the color mode. That does take quite a bit of time, doesn't come through as quickly as the black and white, but we're going to go over that more at a later date. Say okay, go back to home. You can also scan to a USB stick if that is something you would like to do. That's another topic for a later discussion. Okay, let's see. So with the scan function, we can use that. You could use your stamped images if you're a stamp collector, your stamping projects. You can cut your stamped images out. You can do patterns. You can do fussy cut for fabric. And the scan function can also be used as a regular scanner and items saved to the USB. But again, the scan and the direct cut, scan to cut and direct cut will be another whole topic. Okay, so let's go back to our home screen. Now on the left, the bottom button is like a little wrench. So if we touch that, that's our tool setting. And here is where we can set our language. We're using English, but if you want another language, there's 3 pages here that you can go through. All right. Units, you can either do millimeters or inches. Your cut area. Now, your mat is a 12 by 12, or if you're using the extended mat, it would be a 12 by 24 mat. which is available for purchase for the machines. It says here your cut area is 11.73 by 11.65. That's because we can't cut all the way over to the 12-inch limit of the mat. We have to have a little bit of space there so that the machine can read and follow the directions that we're giving. If you are changing the size of your mat, you need to come to this area, all right? If you were, now this one is set up for a 12 by 12 mat, which is what we saw. There's the picture, the icon of our mat. If you were going to a 12 by 24, this is where you would change it. And you can see it changes to a larger, longer mat. Go back to 12. If you wanted to change, if you were going to be doing something and you didn't want to have to worry about the whole mat, if you were going to do a lot of fussy cutting on just the top half or repetitive cutting, you can adjust, customize your mat here to set it up to make it smaller than the actual 12 by 12. All right, so that's what we do here. All right, so we say, okay, that was our cut area. Background. There's 3 choices in your background. This is the dark, medium, and then background off. This is useful when scanning because if you have a light colored, say, fabric and it's on the light mat and you really can't see, you might want to turn your background off or change it to a medium or a complete darker background, depending on what you're doing, but that's an option. Back to the tools. Okay, we have 8 pages here. Page 2, cut speed determines the speed of your blade when you're trying to cut. Some things you can cut faster than others. Most of the time, I just leave it at 3. Now, you'll notice that these numbers all have a black background. Anytime you have a black background on a setting, that indicates that's the default setting for that machine. So if you wanted to speed things up, you can play around with that and you could move it up. But you can always go back to your default setting of 3. If you need less, you want to slow things way down, you can do a negative. Go back to our here. Cut pressure. You may find on some things, I know for heat transfer vinyl, sometimes I'll need to increase the pressure of my blade so that it can actually get through the material. Again, the default is 0. I generally start out at the default and then try to play around from there. And this is a good time to keep that log that I mentioned before of what you're doing with any particular material that you're using, because then you know you've tested it and the next time you want to use it, you have your settings already predetermined and you don't have to go through it all again. The bottom 2 are your draw speed when you're using your pens, and it's just the same as the cut speed and the cut pressure. You have a draw speed and a draw pressure. Sometimes, depending on the pen that you're using, you might want a little bit more pressure so that it's a consistent line in your drawing. Okay, go to number 3. Auto shutdown. This is set at 1 hour. This means that if you haven't touched your machine in an hour, the machine's going to shut down. It will save, if you had a project in the mix, it will save that, but the auto shutdown default is 1 hour. If you know that you're only going to use it for 20 minutes and you want it to shut down, whoops, well, I guess you can go up, it won't go down. So you could set it, higher, but the default set time is 1 hour to shut down. The buzzer, that's our beeps, it tells us what's going on. You can leave that on or turn it off. If it annoys you, you can turn it off. I usually just leave it on. We have a seam allowance. Our standard default is 1/4 inch seam allowance. This can also be increased 5/8 inch for patterns, or you can have the millimeters. The 1/4 inch is generally, I think, what is used for the quilt blocks. The seam allowance is what you can use to draw the 1/4 inch around your block or your piece of fabric for quilting. Pattern interval. The pattern interval of 1 is the default, and you can increase this. This is how many, what call it? The pattern interval. This is the space between the pattern shapes. So if you had 4 stars on your mat and you wanted them to have more space between them, the smaller the number, the shapes, the closer, and the larger the number, more space between the shapes. Oops. Okay, blood pressure, pattern interval. The opening screen, when it went through its little slideshow, you can have that on or off. Scanning, cutting, position adjustment, that's another whole setting that will go into it another time. Blade adjustment is not necessary for just what we're going to be doing. That's another day. Fill an additional line. You can use your drawing to do a pattern, and you can adjust the fill line spacing and the fill direction. And again, when we go to drawing, we can look at this further. We have default settings here. There we go. And these are the patterns that we have available for our fill settings. So if we were to select this, and then we could adjust, what our lines were or our direction, say, okay, and then it doesn't go. Oh, I don't have the map. Okay. But anyway, so that's the basic idea for that. Really, the easiest way to learn is just to stick the mat in with the paper. I use cardstock in the beginning because it's a lot less expensive than your materials, your fabrics, and just play around with the different icons and what's available. There's 2 pages here. So you can add lines, you can add additional line spacing. Mostly if you were going to try to make a design on a card or something. Okay, page 5. This number here is not the serial number of your machine. This is the internal number of your particular machine. This is used when you are setting up your Canvas workspace, and it will connect the workspace over so that you can use it with your machine. The version here, 2.38, this is the current version of software, actually firmware, that this machine is using. It was updated yesterday. Bunny updated it. So again, you go to the Brother site, support.brother.com, and that's where you will find your information on updating your software / firmware on your machine. Your machine information. This is your maximum scan area. Number of patterns in this machine, there's 600 built-in patterns. This machine says that it's available for wireless, and this one also can read Brother applique embroidery data. And that is another topic that we'll cover when we go over fabric at a later time. Page 6, we have our tools for connecting to the network. That's all this information here. You can step through that if you're going to go that route. Page 7 is our scan and cut online. This is to register your machine. And you can do that online if you're not wireless. And the last page is premium functions. These are add-on programs that you can purchase from your dealer. You would activate the programs through Canvas Workspace, and then it would come, you would turn the activation on here. You would get a card, more or less like your activation, your wireless activation card, but you would get a little credit card type piece, and it will have a number on the back. You go online to Canvas Workspace, and it'll walk you through how to activate that card. Come over here, and you would go ahead and whatever kit it is, this is the embossing kit, and it's off. The foiling kit is off. But any of the premium functions, you would log into Canvas Workspace, activate the code there, and then come in. And if you're going to use it on the machine at that time, you would turn it on here. Otherwise, if you tried to do a foiling or an embossing, it would say you don't have that. Excuse me. Okay.
Really quickly, we do understand that some of you may not have all of the things that we're showing on screen. As I mentioned earlier, this is a Scan and Cut 2. This is the last generation of the Scan and Cut 2. It is a model 650WX. So if you have a Scan and Cut 1, it does not have all of these features. And unfortunately, our store has only been open 2.5 years, which is long after the Scan and Cut 1 was discontinued. So you just will have to do a little bit of mental editing as we go through this process. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our screen, and let's select a shape. Let's do a heart. All right. Okay. Now, once you select a pattern or one of the other icons, something that you're going to want to cut or draw, you tap on it and it brings you to this screen. Here, we can adjust our height of our heart. We can say set, and it takes us over to our screen. Oops. Let's see, where's my heart? Oh, okay. Now, if we want to adjust it proportionally, you saw that both numbers changed at the same time. If we wanted to do it so it was not proportional, we touch this little icon here, and then you can change it, the height and the width independently. Okay. The number, we can say we want 5, 6, 7. If you're not sure how many hearts will fit on your mat, you could always put in a number like, let's say 20. And the machine is going to tell you there's not enough space on the mat for that size hearts. The maximum number of hearts you can place on your mat at that size is 4. So that's pretty cool. Okay. If we wanted to, oops, we gotta come add a seam allowance to it. Right there. Okay, we can do that. You can see the outside line. This button here would flip if we had, it's kind of hard to see in the heart since it's one shape, but if we wanted to flip the design one way or another, this is the icon for that. We want to rotate, we can do 90, 10, 1 degrees, either direction. Okay. And this one is if you wanted to draw inside. Let's see, where am I? Okay. You can see that it's put a pattern inside the heart. Okay. All right. So now let's go Okay. Now, when you come to a screen, it says okay to delete all patterns. That's not deleting the patterns in your machine. That is only deleting the patterns that are on your mat. Okay, so if you've added a pattern into your machine, you've saved it, and you're working on it, and then you say, okay, I'm going to do something else, it'll say, okay, to delete all patterns. Well, if you've already saved it, you don't have to worry. It's in your machine. It's only deleting what's on your screen. Okay, let's see. All right, let me go back and get my heart. Okay. So let's just set our heart. Now, this screen, we have add. If we wanted to add a second pattern, we would come in, add a second pattern. We could adjust the height, the width, whatever. And this tells me that this pattern has 3 pieces. It's got the stem, the center, and then a little swirly. Oops. Oh, okay. So we need to come here. This will add our first piece. And then we go back. We're going to add our second piece. Set. And then we add our third piece. Okay, set. So now we have all 3 pieces on our screen. If we wanted to save this at this time, we could push save, and it's going to just go to a memory number in the machine. It doesn't allow you the opportunity to save it with a name. It just gives it a number, and it puts it into the memory bank of your machine. Okay. All right. Let's see. Here we have additional opportunities to edit. We have our zoom. We can zoom 200%, or we can go to 400%. We have arrows to move around our mat. Okay, done that, and you can move your items around as needed. Okay. Select, we can select 1 or more items. If we want to select them all, this will work through the page. If we want to select them all, we push the 3 red boxes. We can select either by framing our item like that, or we can go and select just all, or individually, or as a frame. Okay. If we wanted to get rid of something, let's see. Okay, unselect. So we wanted to get rid of this. This is your trash can. Okay to delete. Okay. All right. Here we can move this, arrows, move it around. We can go back, zoom. Okay. Then here, once again, we can change our height and width, tell it the number of the highlighted item that we would like. And we have our other icons we've talked about. We can do additional editing at this screen. Okay. All right. Now, these items at the bottom, these icons are grayed out because this is the weld and the group icons. And since we don't have multiple items that we want to, let's see. Yeah. Now, since I selected everything, we have our weld and our group icons are available for use. If they're grayed out, they're not available. If you only had 1 item, they were grayed out. Since I selected all 3, now I can group these. oops, can't be welded, no overlaps. I could group these and it put a box around. So it made all three of these into one pattern instead of individuals. Okay. And if I click on it again, it goes back to the original three.
Can you redo that again?
Okay. I have, let's see. All right, so I select my heart. If I want to select all three pieces I have on the screen, I'm going to go here and select all. Okay. Then that makes my group icon available so that instead of having three individual pieces, I hit group and now they've all been combined together into one piece. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay. Now, let's see.
So why would you want to combine it all into a group if you can cut them separately without putting them in a group anyway?
Because
Because you can. Maybe if I were going to put these, like if I had all of these that I was going to cut, say I was going to cut those out of a red piece of cardstock. And so I want to group them all together and place my red cardstock on my mat. And then say I was going to place a piece of pink cardstock down here and I wanted to cut something else. So these would all cut from, I could move them around as a group so that wherever my piece of cardstock was, I could move them instead of having to go and touch each one individually. Ungroup. So instead of having, instead of having to go like this, and then I want to go up here, and then I want to go here, you would group them so they all move as a unit. If you were doing a type of pattern where you needed all the pieces to remain in the correct spacing from each other, then you would want to send it as a group instead of individual pieces. Does that make sense? So you can move it as a whole unit instead of three individual pieces. Say you had, maybe it was, I don't know, like a dog, okay? And you didn't want to just move his body and then his tail and then his head. You wanted to move him as one unit. Then you would want to group the whole thing together so that you could move your dog and still have his tail and his head connected to his body. Does that make better sense?
Yes.
I'll try to get a better example of that next time around. Okay, so let's see where we are. Are we ready for a break?
We can take a break. This would be a good time.
Okay, let's take a break and I'll collect myself here.
Okay, so we will still be able to hear you if you have questions. We're going to turn our microphone and our camera off for just a minute.